All right, good evening, everybody. It is 6:30 on July 6th. We're at the Educational Service Center here in the West Bend School District. This committee's purpose is to review a request for reconsideration related to the Kite Runner and its use at the high school in the ELA curriculum and as a available resource in our libraries for the public. And for those of you who are in an early meeting, you'll hear some things twice tonight. We have one library at our high school, and we combined that a few years ago into a larger library space at that point in time. My name is Tim Harder. I'm the Director of Technology, Libraries, and Career Education for the school district. Typically, I'd also be here with our C&I Director, however that position is vacant currently, so I'll be the only chair of this committee this evening. The purpose of this committee is to review the book, The Kite Runner, and so you have an agenda in front of you this evening. We will do introductions shortly here, and then we will come back the second time to talk about strengths and concerns of the resource, and then the committee's job is to make a recommendation as we go forward. And so really that is what our process is here this evening. I want to take the opportunity for everybody to introduce themselves to the committee, and then I'll go through different pieces on there this evening. We are driven by some committee norms and how we're going to act, and I'll review that here today. We do have two members who are absent and excused this evening from our committee. Jen Potter, our principal, as I said in the early meeting, and Kim Christensen, our library media coordinator. Being summer, sometimes we're limited in certain roles of when we can take vacations, or we've had vacations planned years out ahead. Those committee members who are absent commit to the same things that the people in front of you see for you two ladies. They will also review the video and all of those different types of things, get the same exact packet and so forth in front of them. So, Ms. Sarek, if you don't mind doing introductions, and we'll work our way around the room this way today.
I'm Susan Sarek. I'm an assistant principal for East and West High Schools.
I'm Jennifer Chamberlain. I'm a parent of two girls and women who went through the district. My youngest just graduated a few weeks ago.
I'm Lillian Tyrella. I'm going to be a sophomore at West Bend West High School.
Michelle Proudfoot, I teach English for West High. Kristen Becker, I also teach English for West High School. Julie Geenan, and I'm one of the people that put on the challenge. And I'm Carol Hager, who assisted with the challenge. And I just wanted to brief those of you who were not at the first meeting that Jody is very modest, but she has many years of experience working with youth groups, and 40 years, in fact, as a teacher of religious education classes for all ages of children and youth, and even adults with disabilities, which she continues to do even today. We both have had children who graduated from West Bend School District. I think the most recent was about 5 years ago, was for my son. But I have a bachelor's degree in history and a master's in secondary education, and I specialized in teaching social studies at the middle and high school levels. And after teaching, I pursued a career for about 25 years in museum education, which is researching and writing and presenting all kinds of programs and tours at different museums, like an art museum, a children's museum, historic sites, a couple national park sites where I was a park ranger, and I even did some living history at a historic schoolhouse where I met Susan Sarek for the first time as a teacher from Richfield. Yes, exactly.
Great.
So thank you all for coming tonight, and we look forward to the discussion.
All right, so in your packet this evening, everybody got a large packet, that is yours to keep. We do have committee norms in there. As we'll get into the policies, what drive this, but just as a reminder to this group, we are here to review the resource, the Kite Runner. We are not here to talk about process, notification, other curriculum materials, make recommendations for other books and so forth. We are just really here to look at this resource and its use at the high school level. So the committee norms are laid out in here that we're going to be engaged in the process. For those of you committee members, that means when you signed up to be on this committee or you're appointed, you agreed to the fact that you would read the book, you will be engaged in the process, you'll review all the resources that are given to you and so forth. You'll contribute and challenge ideas, but there's no personal attack on anybody in their beliefs or whatever they say. It's a fact, or it's a seeking mission on an appropriate use of this resource at our high school level. We'll all be active listeners throughout the process and seek understanding. That includes committee members, challengers, as we have everybody at the table this evening. We agree to stay on topic. That's hard. You can definitely go off topic on this. There's a lot of things that play into this again. My job is to bring it back to the purpose of the committee, and that's to review the use of the Kite Runner. We want everybody to share ideas, doesn't mean you have to speak at either of the meetings. There will be an opportunity this evening for our committee members to ask clarifying questions from our requesters when we're done, but you do not need to speak, and there's no requirement to ask a question and so forth. And then we want to be respectful of each other as we go through. We've been through 2 of these first meetings, typically about an hour, so we'll keep it around that time frame today. So in your packet is what you have is after your committee norms, there is a set of school district policies. And so we are guided by district policies from the school board that go with it. The first policy is policy 361.1, which is the policy around instructional resources for the district. So I give that to the committee between now and our next meeting. Please take an opportunity to read that through so you are aware of what that policy is. The second item in there is an administrative rule, so 361.1, and then it's AR, and that is an administrative rule. For the public and for those of you who are on this committee who may not know, an administrative rule are the steps that we take to follow on a policy, and or descriptive in nature. They define certain things. They may include an exhibit or a form, a variety of different pieces. And so this AR really defines the different types of instructional resources we have in our district, from library media resources to primary curricular resources to supplementary curricular resources and so forth, the criteria for selection of those resources, the process of that in terms of what that looks like, and really what we are tasked with is number 4 within that administrative rule, which is the public complaint guidelines on instructional resources in the district. And so in full transparency, this process starts by asking a community member, a parent, to make the request or have a conversation at the site level with the principal, or sometimes it does happen over here at district administrative offices. If the person who has a concern about the instructional resource feels that their concern was not rectified in the way they would like, or they would like to do a formal process for reconsideration, they complete a 3-page form that is in your packet here this evening. That goes through that, and then that gets turned in. We set up this is a 2-meeting process in terms of what that looks like. This administrative rule actually outlines who's involved in the process. As I said earlier, our director of curriculum instruction position is vacant, so it'll be me chairing this evening and at our next meeting. And then it talks about who is on the committee. So depending upon the curricular resource, sometimes also a member of our student services team for special education, counseling, etc. would be involved. Sometimes some of our administrative staff here and coordinators will be here. Kim Christensen, our district library media coordinator, who is excused absent this evening. And then we have a teacher, or 2 teacher representatives by the administrative rule, 1 parent, and because this is a high school resource, a student. And so those 3 positions are selected by a random draw, so it is communicated out to all of those different stakeholders. This last Monday at 3 o'clock, we did a drawing for all of those who put their names in. Use an online random number generator, match that number up, and that's how we selected the people that we see here sitting in front of us. So thank you for all of you being willing to serve on this committee meeting. I did not bring somebody with me to take notes tonight. This meeting is being videotaped and streamed, so I can go back and watch that. Number 2 in there is really what we're here to do. We are here to review the selection and reconsideration process, which I just kind of briefly went over. You have that with you. The committee will read, view, or listen to that challenge material in its entirety. You'll check reviews and so forth to go there. We have invited our complaints this evening to talk about why they feel this resource should be reconsidered. And then you will go back, read, do some things, and then when we come back, we will do E and F at our second meeting on the 19th, and I'll talk more about that later. Our sole purpose of this committee is to make a recommendation. We are not a deciding factor in any way, shape, or form. This committee does not remove curriculum materials from the school district. That is the board's work to do in this complaint process. What we will do is when we are done, I will listen next time. I will write down all your points, and then I will write up a report based upon what this committee's desires are for recommendation next. The recommendation does not have to be unanimous, so it can be a split decision. And then all of you will get a copy of that, and a copy is then forwarded on to the superintendent. Depending upon the outcome of the review, the 2 people who have asked for the request can also challenge that request as an appeal to the superintendent if they aren't satisfied with that answer. Or if there was a recommendation to remove that, then it has to go to the board through the superintendent to remove that. And that's a timeline piece. Yep.
Can you just I just want to make sure I'm catching up with you.
Yep.
The decision of the committee is done through a vote? It's not through consensus, you're
Yep.
saying?
It's on to consensus. We will see where we go and what the feeling is of the committee. If they want to have two different sets of recommendations, they can do that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So really, the idea being written in the policy that you could have a split committee in that sense. Very much almost like a Supreme Court case type of thing, where you see a dissenting view or opposite views. We would write both those feelings into
Got it.
the recommendation at that point in time for the record. And then you all will get a copy of that too. But my goal is to just write what you say at that point in time. We are bound to a 30 business day timeline, and with vacations and everything else, we're trying to pair those up in the summer times. I pass it off to the superintendent of the board at that point in time, and then they take that over at that point. One thing to note in our administrative rule, that after this process is completed, we are only, the district's policy and administrative rule say that a review can only be done on a resource every 3 years. So whatever the process is and decided, it holds for 3 years, and it can come back either way after 3 years at that point. So, any questions on the process and so forth? All right, the last policy that is in there, after the form that you see, is policy 362. So because this request actually asks for a removal of the material from our library media center, that is a separate policy between instructional resources and use in a curricular material. This is the policy that drives what we believe our library media centers here in the school district to be. And so that is for the committee to lay out what we believe that process is, and that board policy that outlines that in the cross-reference to any other policies that we have there. So you have a copy of that this evening. So that is that process as we go forward. The current use of this is used in a couple of different places at the high school. So it is a book club book in a unit called The Hero's Journey in English 2. It is a book that has been used in the past in contemporary literature as a whole class read. However, that course is in a remodel mode, and it may not be part of that in the future. And then this book also does have a listing on the AP reading list for our advanced placement courses. So those lists are often used as reference and guides for kids to read for other books, and then there are also copies available in our library at that point. So that is where it currently is used. The next portion of your packet this evening is really the request for instructional resource form that you see here from Ms. Hager and Ms. Geeden. So at this point in time, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to you two ladies, 10, 15, 20 minutes max, to go through what you have. Committee members, they did provide a copy of their statement this evening, so you should have that. If I missed one of you, I apologize. But I will turn it over to you ladies at that point in time. Committee members, you will have an opportunity to ask clarifying questions after the fact. So go ahead.
I'd say for at least the past year or so, both of us have become concerned about books being used in public schools in both the curriculum and on library bookshelves. We saw and read news stories about school districts all over the country, especially in Virginia. There was a lot going on where parents and residents were protesting the use of inappropriate books that were indoctrinating students with liberal ideas and politicizing and sexualizing students. We began to investigate the books being used on English reading lists, book clubs, at both Badger Middle School and the high schools. And we learned about the Kite Runner. We discovered it was on the high school reading list for juniors. It's set in Afghanistan, as many of you know who have read the book or teach about the book, before the war with the Soviet Union and before 9/11, and then it proceeds through the years. The book focuses on the Muslim culture, including misogyny and Sharia law, but it also has a theme of forgiveness and redemption. Unfortunately, the book is full of violence and includes beatings, shootings, the selling of children from orphanages into sex slavery, bloody stonings, and numerous rapes, including heterosexual man-on-woman, man-on-boy, and pedophilic adults-on-children rape. After reviewing The Kite Runner, we decided that all versions of the book should be removed from the West Bend School District, from the 11th grade English 3 reading list, and from the school library. The library contains 3 standard copies of The Kite Runner, a graphic novel version, an ebook, an audiobook, and a DVD of the film. All of these should be removed. Although not as detailed as the book, the graphic novel version includes many of the indecent scenes as well as accompanying images. In fact, the man on the rape scene, which will be discussed later, includes a picture of a man pulling down his pants zipper and saying, "Turn him and get his pants down." By the way, the West Bend Public Library has cataloged The Kite Runner as an adult book, and it is shelved in the adult section, not the young adult section. Jody will now discuss a selection of quotations from The Kite Runner.
This is an adult book that is not meant for minors, as I will attempt to reveal through a sample of excerpts, many of which were not submitted in the initial challenge packet and have been condensed for the sake of time. They are neither easy to read nor to hear and would definitely be rated R if it were a movie, so I apologize to anyone tuning in or here in attendance who may be offended. Our hope is that this committee will decide to protect impressionable youths by reserving this book for adults, and that this challenge serves as a Paul Revere warning to the community who haven't fallen prey to desensitization of violence, profanity, and sexually explicit media to use caution with everything their children are learning or have access to in our school district. Here's an excerpt from an attempted suicide scene, page 350 to 351, not found in the initial paperwork. I tried to not look at the bathtub. It was clean now. Someone had wiped off the blood, spread new floor mats on the floor, and scrubbed the walls. But I couldn't stop myself from sitting on its cool porcelain edge. I pictured Sorab filling it with warm water, saw him undressing, saw him twisting the razor handle and opening the twin safety latches on the head, sliding the blade out, holding it between his thumb and forefinger. I pictured him lowering himself into the water, lying there for a while, eyes closed. I wondered what his last thought had been as he had raised the blade and brought it down. Another excerpt on the attempted suicide, page 303. Water drops dripping from the faucet and landing with a plink into the bloody bath water. The left arm dangling over the side of the tub. The blood-soaked razor sitting on the toilet, the same razor I had shaved with the day before, and his eyes, still half open but lightless. That, more than anything, I want to forget the eyes. Here's an excerpt of the stoning of a man and woman accused of adultery per Sharia law during halftime entertainment of a sporting event, pages 268 to 272. They brought them out shortly after the halftime whistle blew. Two Talibs with Kalashnikovs, automatic rifles, slung across their shoulders, helped the blindfolded man from the first truck, and two others helped the burqa-clad woman. The woman's knees buckled under her, and she slumped to the ground. When they tried to lift her again, she screamed and kicked. I will never, as long as I draw breath, forget the sound of that scream. It was a cry of a wild animal trying to pry its mangled leg free from the bear trap. The blindfolded man, on the other hand, quietly allowed them to lower him into the hole dug for him. Now only the accused pair's torsos protruded from the ground. And what manner of punishment, brothers and sisters, befits the adulterer? How shall we punish those who dishonor the sanctity of marriage? We shall throw the stones back. The tall Talib picked up a rock and showed it to the crowd. Looking absurdly like a baseball pitcher on the mound, hurled the stone at the blindfolded man in the hole. It struck the side of his head. The woman screamed. The crowd made a startled "oh" sound. I closed my eyes and covered my face with my hands. The spectators' "oh" rhymed with each flinging of the stone, and that went on for a while. The man in the hole was now a mangled mess of blood and shredded rags, his head slumped forward, chin on chest. When it was all over, when the bloody corpses had been unceremoniously tossed into the backs of the red pickup trucks, a few men with shovels hurriedly filled the holes. A few minutes later, the team took the field. Second half was underway. An excerpt regarding the violence of Sharia law and how God is characterized as supporting vengefulness and violence, something that could be confusing for vulnerable, underdeveloped minds, pages 283 to 284, not found in the challenge paperwork. We were crammed in groups of 6 in these tiny cells, each the size of a refrigerator. Every night the commandant would have one of the prisoners dragged out of the cell, and he'd beat him until sweat poured from his fat face. Then he'd light a cigarette, crack his joints, and leave. The next night he'd pick someone else. One night he picked me. It couldn't have come at a worse time. I'd been peeing blood for 3 days. They dragged me out, and he started kicking me. He had knee-high boots with steel toes that he wore every night for this little kicking game, and he used them on me. I was screaming and screaming, and he kept kicking me, and then suddenly, he kicked me on the left kidney, and the stone passed. Just like that, Asif laughed. And I yelled, Allah Akbar, and he kicked me even harder, and I started laughing. He got mad and hit me harder, and the harder he kicked me, the harder I laughed. They drew me back in the cell laughing, because suddenly I knew that had been a message from God. He was on my side. I ran into that commandant on the battlefield a few years later. Funny how God works. I found him in a trench, bleeding from a piece of shrapnel in his chest. He was still wearing those same boots. I asked him if he remembered me. He said no. I told him that I never forget a face. Then I shot him in the balls. I've been on a mission since. Another violent excerpt not found in the challenge submitted, pages 288 to 291. His brass knuckles flashing in the afternoon light. How cold they felt with the first few blows and how quickly they warmed with my blood. Getting thrown against the wall, Sorb screaming, the knuckles shattering my jaw, choking on my own teeth and swallowing them. Getting hurled against the wall, lying on the floor, blood from my split upper lip staining the mauve carpet, pain ripping through my belly, and wondering when I'd be able to breathe again. The sound of my ribs snapping like the tree branches Hassan and I used to break to sword fight like Sinbad in those old movies. Sorab screaming, the side of my face slamming against the corner of the television stand. That snapping sound again, this time just under my left eye. Music, Sorab screaming. Fingers grasping my hair, pulling my head back, the twinkle of stainless steel. Here they come, that snapping sound yet again. Now my nose, biting down in pain, noticing how my teeth didn't align like they used to, getting kicked. Sorab screaming, holding the cup of the slingshot at the end of the elastic band, which was pulled all the way back. There was a brass ball in the slingshot pointed to Asif's face. The slingshot made a thwee sound when Sorab released the cup. Then Asif was screaming. He put his hand where his left eye had been just a moment ago. Blood oozed between his fingers, blood and something else, something white and gel-like. That's called vitreous fluid, I thought with clarity. Asif rolled on the carpet, rolled side to side, shrieking, his hand still cupped over the bloody socket. Get it out, he screamed. Here's a sample of one of the many vulgar sexual excerpts found in the book, page 6. He handed a cigarette to the guy next to him, made a circle with the thumb and index finger of one hand, poked the middle of his other hand through the circle, poked it in and out, in and out. I knew your mother, didn't you know that? I knew her real good. I took her from behind by the creek over there. What a tight little sugary cunt she had, the soldier was saying, shaking hands with the others, grinning. And here is the infamous gang rape scene, page 66. Hassan lay his chest pinned to the ground. Fine, Asif snapped. All I want you weaklings to do is hold him down. Can you manage that? Asif knelt behind Hassan, put his hands on Hassan's hips, and lifted his bare buttocks. He kept one hand on Hassan's back and undid his own belt buckle with his free hand. He unzipped his jeans, dropped his underwear. He positioned himself behind Hassan. I stopped watching, turned away from the alley. From just around the corner, I could hear Asif's quick, rhythmic grunts. Finally, I will give a sample of the profanity. From chapter 17, you bastards, I muttered. Stood up. You goddamn bastards, I screamed. All of you, you bunch of lying goddamn bastards. From page 132, fuck the Russia, Bubba said.
In your packet, you've got some reviews from different book organizations. Booklooks.org lists the number of profanities in the Kite Runner. You might think they're not as bad as some of these other books we've been reading. There are 12 uses of goddamn, 6 of piss, 4 of the F-bomb, 3 of shit, as well as words such as ass, cunt, as you heard, fag, and prick. Pluggedin.com added these words that Booklooks obviously overlooked: bastard and balls. God's name is used in vain as well as Jesus' name. Pluggedin.com relates a disturbing scene referencing Christianity. A Taliban official who later turns out to be Asif approaches a man sentenced to death. His arms are spread out like Jesus on the cross. Asif throws the first rock to stone the man to death. Booklooks.org actually has a warning on the title page of its report. It rates the Kite Runner as 4 and not for minors out of a scale of 5, with 5 being the most offensive books. The warning actually states, which you might not see because it's quite small in the corner, you are about to access material that may contain content of an adult nature. These files may include pictures and materials that some viewers may find offensive. If you are under the age of 18, or if such material offends you, or if it is illegal for you to view these materials, please exit now. CommonSenseMedia.org rates the violence and scariness factor of the book as 5 stars and explains why. The Kite Runner's violent incidents are many and graphic: deaths by shooting, stoning, and suffocation, severe beatings, and attempted suicide. A young boy's homosexual rape is described in detail. The rapist later flaunts his power over another boy by fondling him in front of another adult. This author does not shy from detailed descriptions of blood, wounds, sickness, and fear. We are not the only citizens asking that the Kite Runner be removed from a school district. In fact, this book is ranked number 11 on the list of the most commonly challenged books in the U.S. for the decade 2010 to 2019. And this is according to statistics collected by the American Library Association and from Wikipedia. Reasons given for the Kite Runner in particular being challenged are, and they only gave a few reasons: offensive language, unsuited to age group, and violence. And these are books on this list, ALA list, that are being challenged, books that are both in a library or a school curriculum. More than 1,600 books were removed from schools during the last school year, 2021 to 2022. And the Kite Runner appears on this list, so this is only looking at schools. It once again ranked 11 in the titles of those most challenged. How did the Kite Runner get approved for minors, especially here at West Bend? Is it really going to harm the English program if this book is swapped out for one of a higher caliber that is inspiring and character building? Has the district considered thinking about books as a contributing factor in character formation? We don't believe that it would be hard to find another book that would meet the district's guidelines and policy 361-1, which we're probably all familiar with. This book does not meet most of those criteria. We believe the book could desensitize young readers to continual violence and vulgar sexual activities. There is sexual perversion highlighted by the character who abuses and traffics in children and other characters who rape women. Are teachers trained to deal with the potential wounds that might be opened up as a result of reading and discussing this book, especially children who have experienced trauma in their background? If profane words are not allowed in the school setting, why are they allowed to be read in books like The Kite Runner? I don't believe the district wants young men in particular to think misogynistic words like cunt are acceptable in our society. Perhaps the district should consider the book selection process that a charter school uses in Colorado. And speaking about this, they explain the people at this school, they're thinking very intentionally as adults about the signals they're sending to kids about the ideals and behaviors they seek to promote among children. This book is definitely not age appropriate. Most of us use the movie rating system to help us decide what movies are appropriate for our children. Minors are not allowed to view each and every movie, especially if it's R-rated, where minors under 17 require an accompanying parent or adult guardian who has to sit with them. And in fact, we also learned when we were investigating the 57 bus that if there are 2 F-bombs in a movie, it automatically gets the R rating. The content of The Kite Runner and its profanity most likely wouldn't even meet the standards of media, such as the local daily news or even television news stations. It certainly is a strange book selection, I believe, for the conservative Washington County, where residents are known for their traditional values. I wonder who in this school district or on this school board who is perfectly fine with approving violent and sexualized content like The Kite Runner. The public, taxpayer-funded education of our children should be free of immoral influences. When local school districts refuse to protect children and remove sexually explicit content from the curriculum or from the libraries, then perhaps the state legislature should step in, as what happened in Texas recently. The Texas legislature voted to ban sexually explicit books from classrooms and school libraries. An advocate of the bill noted that the books included all sexual orientations. LGBTQ books are not being targeted or singled out in Texas. Asking for the Kite Runner to be removed from the school district is not book banning. Families are able to find this book at the local library or may buy it from Amazon. This is about the ability of parents and taxpayers to determine what material is appropriate for certain age levels. Parents have the right to direct their children's upbringing, including making sure their education is free of immoral influences. Families have the right to remove their children from schools that offer perverted, sexualized reading material as part of the curriculum, especially when those schools' test scores are in many cases below average. Unfortunately, we both know families who have had questions about the curriculum content or classroom activities, and they have not spoken out, and even now wish to remain anonymous because of fear of retaliation from either classroom peers or teachers. In fact, both of us as parents of West Bend School District students have experienced that very situation. We know that some of you will try to justify the book being on an English book club list because the Kite Runner does not need to be selected, or it's a choice. But the fact that it is offered as a selection for an English class assignment makes it part of the curriculum. Many parents trust the school district not to offer vile materials to their children until it's too late, and they discover their children's minds have already been damaged and infected by the sexualized and violent content. Does the school district want to earn the trust of the community, or does it want to be known as the school district where anything goes?
Thank you, ladies. All right, the next item in our agenda, number 6, is an opportunity for our committee members to ask clarifying questions from either of the requesters. Just a reminder again that they are clarifying questions related to the content of the book or its purpose in the curriculum, etc. at that point in time. So I will open up the floor at this point for any clarifying questions.
I know it says in here that it would be rated R if it were a movie, but correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there is a Kite Runner movie that's PG-13.
Yes.
And maybe that movie
Okay.
doesn't use the F word more than once, right?
I was just saying, because it was in here as though, it kind of made it seem as though there is not a movie, but it will be to be made into a movie. That
Yeah,
would
if
be
this
fair.
book, using the words that are in
Gotcha.
this book, the scenes set the way it is in this book, it would definitely be rated R. Okay.
And the library does have the DVD according to GoFollow.com.
And the other thing I know, I sat through the last meeting too, I know some of you said, well, it should be like the right of the parent to sign off if their child should read it. When you go to the movie theater, you do not get to go, as far as I know, unless they've changed things, recently, you do not get to go to the movie theater and sign off for your child to go into the movie by themselves to view it. You have to go in with the child to watch it, okay? When a parent signs off on this, I doubt that I bet that almost no parents are gonna sit down and read this book with their child. But if they want to do that, we're not telling them they can't do that, that's their prerogative to do that. Just get it from Amazon, get it from the local library, wherever, and sit down and read it with your child. It just shouldn't be part of the curriculum where parents shouldn't have to worry that, I've been to school board meetings where teachers get upset because we don't trust them. But then when we have an opportunity for them, this gives people a reason not to trust, because because they're given vile materials that they could choose, like, oh, the Kite Runner sounds pretty good, and when you read some things about it, yes, there's some redemption and forgiveness. There's lots of good stories that are about redemption and forgiveness without having to be vile, and that parents would be happy to have their kids learn about.
As an administrator, and especially looking at our advanced placement scores,
Mhm.
because it's college and career readiness, and if the Kite Runner is on the list of acceptable books for AP and College Board for college preparation, we have outstanding AP scores, and so if that book, college is saying, hey, this is a great book to prepare students, and they're recommending it, that's part of the college and career readiness.
And you could send that book home, that list home with the parents and say, these are some books that they recommend, that maybe you could have your AP student who's very smart take the time to read on their own, but it doesn't mean that we have to offer it as part of the curriculum. We
Well,
can
we
just give
offer-
them the list and say, this is what AP recommends, if you wanna do this on your own, go ahead, you should take that opportunity if you feel it's important, because it's not one of the books on the list that we're gonna, the kids probably don't read 15 books in the school year for their class, right, as part of their curriculum, right?
Having choice
Mm-hmm.
is a critical piece.
Right, and there's millions of books that we could be choosing for kids to read, right? There's
Right,
millions of books.
absolutely.
And that
you know-
one book isn't gonna make or break whether or not they're gonna pass the AP class. I've had kids go through,
But
all
it's
my kids went
aligned-
through AP.
They're
you know.
aligned to so many different of our curricula across content areas
Mhm.
that this is a book that
Then-
hits so
then
many
it-
targets.
Then if it's that important, then why is it on the choice list? If it's that important for them to get through the AP classes, why is it even a choice? Why don't you just say, in this class, we are going to do the Kite Runner because we know it's that important for the AP class for you to get by. So we don't want you to miss to have this, right? If it's either it's that important that they should all be reading it, or they can make that choice
Can it
on the side. That's
be
what I
a
do.
choice?
It
Because
can be.
we
That's
have
what
kids
we
who are
have the
taking
public library for.
college level classes
That's what we have the public
that
library
we have
for.
adopted here.
That's what we have the
And
public
nursing.
library for. And I hope that more students are reading more than just what they're being asked to read in school. I hope that they're doing more reading on the side.
But we also have a school library where they
Mhm.
should be able to access those materials from the AP reading list.
Correct. And they do.
What is the title of the AP? Are there several AP English classes?
We have 2 English classes, English Lit and AP Lang. And then
sorry, English
AP English
Lit?
Language and Composition, and then English Literature. and
English
Composition.
language and composition?
Mhm.
And which one is the Kite Runner in English literature?
It's
not AP.
What?
They have a long list of
It's
books.
just one of the recommended lists,
One of
yeah.
the recommended, but it's not.
No,
Recommended books and then the
Recommended
students choose?
I mean, they have a huge list. And so that's what's important, is to have that huge list.
Do the parents have to sign off on any of these books?
Well, we have a process,
What do you mean by that?
for the book clubs and
Well,
having those
that's
choice.
for like the juniors, right?
Yeah,
Junior
and
English 3.
juniors take AP classes.
Okay, but the AP class is different from English 3, right?
Yeah,
What I understand is that the book club is part of English 3, that's what I've been
and
told.
I'll clarify, so the book club is English 2 at the high school. For the AP classes, the AP puts out a list, and Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong. They put out a list of here's X number of books we recommend you consider reading, and you pick it as a parent. I don't know because that list is longer if it's the same exact process, but I can find out more on that as we go forward. But again, I want to remind us,
Yeah.
we're not on that process piece. Let's talk about the content of the
Good.
I
program.
have some questions, if that's
Mhm.
okay. So you mentioned, and I kind of feel like actually during introductions, I maybe should have done a little bit more about, I'm not just a parent. I mean, no one's just a
Yeah, we
parent.
know.
Right,
Although,
Yeah.
best job ever.
right.
But I also am a librarian, so
Right.
just like in full disclosure, I have a
Yeah.
master's in library science, I have an English degree, I have a teaching certificate, English 300, so I, not that I'm an expert, but I come at this more than just a parent perspective.
Right.
So that's just full disclosure, and I work for an organization that helps libraries. So I wanted to know more about, so one of your concerns is about the adult nature of the book.
Mhm.
And so, is it the adult nature of this book, or are you concerned about adult natures, adult topics and other materials that might be at this
First of
level?
all, we're talking about this.
This book,
This is
right,
all we should
right,
talk
right.
about. Yeah.
okay,
And so,
but,
and we're talking about the adult nature of this book.
sure, I was just
Okay.
thinking in terms of, you mentioned that the fact that this is shelved as an adult book at a public library equates that it maybe shouldn't be in a school library that serves students who aren't adults, right? So I was just curious if
Right.
that was more the concern or if it's the thematic pieces of the book.
I think it's both.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thematic pieces are probably why it's shelved as an adult book at the public library.
Okay.
They go together. So
Yeah,
I'm concerned about both.
sure.
I'm
It could
concerned
be-
about
it could be
both. I'm looking at
reading
it like
level.
I'm worried about the thematic pieces, and I feel like the public library has validated my concerns for the thematic pieces by shelving it as an adult book. That it's not just my mind that's not a teacher for schools, you know,
Certainly.
public schools, that somebody, other professionals determined that the content of this book made it have to be shelved as an adult book.
Sure, however.
And so they also had a library degree that you have too, I would think, the ones that decided
Oh,
to
sure.
shelve it. Okay,
Sure. Don't need to get into debating that, I was just
Okay.
kind of curious about the
Right.
logic. just
right, so
simply
that's my,
because,
yeah,
you know, you're gonna find Charles Dickens in an adult section, like, right, there's
Right.
lots of literature
Right.
that is probably in the curriculum, I'm not an expert in what is offered,
Right.
that is in an adult because of
Right.
lexicon or reading level or
right,
whatnot. Okay, so I was just curious about that.
okay.
You mentioned several times, Sharia law and the concern, I'm trying to see now where I had this. Something about, focusing on Muslim culture, including misogyny.
That was on the first.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I just need clarification personally on that. Are you implying that Muslim culture is
So
equivalent to
what I'm
misogyny?
worried,
or
what
that
I'm
there's-
worried about is
No,
that those
can I
that
just
read,
finish my
yes,
question?
I know, okay, I was gonna say, I know what you're asking me.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm concerned that when people read this book, they are going to equivalate, or whatever you wanna say, make it equal, that Muslim culture is Sharia law. Because that's how this book is written. It doesn't, there's nothing in this book that says Muslims are nice or anything like that, okay? And so actually, anybody who's a Muslim in this school who doesn't believe in Sharia law, I would think would be offended because people are gonna read this and think this is what their religion is about,
Okay, so you're
right?
concerned.
So I'm looking out for the Muslims, okay?
Okay,
So,
okay.
I think I don't know if this relates to this as well, but we were also concerned, and we talked about it a little bit, that some students who have virtually no background in religion, which is very common these days, would consider that the God that Christians believe in and that Jews believe in is similar to the God that the Muslims believe in, a God, in many cases, that is very vindictive and would want an adulterous couple to be stoned in public. We don't want young people to be confused. That's not the God of all religions. That's that one particular religion.
Actually, English 2 would be a great place for this book to be because freshman year, global studies is required, or AP Human Geography. And they do an incredible in-depth analysis comparing all the religions. So our students, all of our students, do have that background so that they know Sharia law is a small sect. They know that's not all Muslims. They know that for a fact. Okay, I just want to
okay,
put
but
that
this
out there.
book encourages that type of thing.
I don't
Okay.
agree with that,
Yeah,
because I have been in a Muslim country.
right.
And having.
I've had a
having-
Muslim live with me for a year, so I
having
understand
educators-
too.
Stop, please.
I do,
That having educators who can talk to the students, talk about it, infuse the culture, that's critical.
When they're reading this book though, when they get to pick off the list, are they actually having a teacher guide them through this book? Or are they? It doesn't sound like they are. They get to pick any book off the list and stuff. It doesn't sound like it's being guided by anybody. They're gonna read it, maybe write a paper on it, maybe they'll have a little discussion between their friends that isn't guided still, right? How guided is it?
It's actually focused, do you want to talk about how book clubs work? and-
So we do actually have specific topics and ideas that students talk about. And it's not just willy-nilly random, they just
Right.
go and talk about whatever.
Right,
Depending on the book, we will say, I want you to talk talk about the theme that you're noticing, talk about this, and we as teachers float around.
You
like,
float around, but
we
you're
float
not really
around.
there the whole time to guide it. You're just letting them
But
do the
we-
talking.
I have discovered as a former teacher, and that seems like group projects, which probably originated back in the 70s, just are not good. I mean, if it's just a student-led group, man, half the time you're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the book.
Actually.
I'm gonna stop us and bring us back, because we keep going off track to, you want to talk about, and for everybody, and I asked the entire committee, the requesters, to please keep on track of the fact that we're here
And we
to talk
refuse
about.
to
And this is-
ask
right.
questions, or answer questions. if
You
we
can say you
feel-
don't wanna answer that, yeah. Yeah,
But-
and I would
but-
ask the committee
right.
to make it clear that it's a
I
clarifying
do feel like this
question.
was on topic though, because it's like they're asking us, why are we worried about these books? And then they're trying to give the reasons why we shouldn't be worried, and we're trying to say, and then we're asking them more questions, and we're just coming out.
Ms. Keegan,
exactly what we
I
think.
was trying to stay away from the conversation
Okay.
about the appropriateness of group versus individual.
Okay,
So that's why I asked our.
Oh, okay. okay,
I do have another clarifying question.
okay.
Just because I honestly don't, I think I'm just really missing something, that's my
Okay.
bad. On the second or third page, the middle paragraph says another violent excerpt not found in the challenge submitted, and I just don't know what that language means. What
Okay,
is not
well,
found in the
well,
challenge?
originally we submitted a challenge and it had a
Should be
bunch
in your
of,
packet.
okay.
Got it.
But then when we
Okay.
got ready for this, we were like, oh, there's so many more things we could add that to get an even
Thank you.
better, clearer picture of
I
what
didn't know
the
if you were
content
referring
is.
to another challenge or your.
No,
own.
no,
Got it.
this challenge here,
Okay.
this is just like added stuff that you can use to help you
Yes,
decide.
additional.
Additional.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, go ahead.
I just have one question, which is, what makes you two more qualified to decide or to determine what I can and cannot read rather than my own parents or my own teachers?
Again, we were saying that your parents and that you can ask them, can I go read this book? And they can say yes, and you can go get it from Amazon, you can get it from the library and stuff. But there's certain things that are allowed and aren't allowed. Would you get in trouble if you were in school and you started shouting the F word in the hallways or called your teacher, you effing bitch or something? Would they be like, well, if your family decides that that's appropriate language, we're going to allow you to do that? No, there's
No.
certain rules that you have that are allowable and aren't allowable. And so we're saying that we think that this book is with the stuff that's in it, it's not what people send their kids to school for. They don't send their kids to school to learn about all different kind of rapes and things like that. They want character building, so yes, the redemption part is great, but there's millions of books out there that we could choose that could show redemption and character building without having to be violent, vile, and things like that.
But I feel like my parents would rather have me read this book in a supervised setting where I can go up to my teacher and ask specific questions about the book if I don't understand it or I'm having just trouble with it, rather than reading it at home by myself where I don't have anyone to go up and ask those questions to.
Don't you have, I would think that there wouldn't be enough time in this classroom to read this in the classroom. You might be able to discuss it amongst your friends, like they said, they have teachers that are floating around. But even if you read this book on your own and you didn't have it on the list, do you think that your teachers would refuse to talk to you about a book that you read on your own if you had questions about it?
No, but
So no one's stopping the teachers from helping you with the book that you decided to read on your own, and no one's stopping you from going to your teachers and asking for help on books that you're reading on your own.
But most of the time, at least I know when I read books on my own, it's over breaks or like summer break, because during the school year, I am more focused on the books I am reading in class. And so having that time during flexi time especially, to go up and have an in-depth conversation directly with my teacher helps me understand and fully recognize the book for what it is.
I have a question. Do you feel that reading some of the profanity and the vulgar rape scenes and anything, how does that affect your fellow students? You seem to be very mature, but I would imagine boys in particular who are usually developmentally behind, all of your brains are still developing. You're not 25 years, which is when the brain is supposed to be fully developed. How do they react? Do some of the boys repeat some of the words when you read books that have kind of like some swear words in it? Do the boys repeat those and?
Well, I know personally that when I'm at school, I do hear these words even before we read books that have these words in it, because that is just what teenagers do,
Right.
and you can't really do anything to stop that. As for the more violent sexual scenes, I'd say that, you know, it would help to have it read it in classroom, because then you can directly have a teacher saying, you know, yes, we are reading this, and yes, this happens, but this is not okay.
And do you need a teacher to tell you it's not okay?
I personally
you-
don't, but some people they may need to. if-
Maybe they never even thought about how to rape someone, but they're getting the directions in here. I mean, I mean, there's two ways to look at it, don't you think? There's two ways to, and by, you said you hear people use these vile words, but by reading it, it's like reinforcing it instead of not reading it.
You're not supposed to be saying the vile words in school, right? We have standards in schools. You shouldn't be saying them, so why are we reading them?
And
Ms.
I
Sarah,
just-
you have a question?
we keep talking about the rape scene, and in here it says describes in detail. I do know that it was a small portion of
There's more
the
than one rape
actual,
scene.
There's a
Yeah.
couple of rape
the
scenes.
homosexual rape scene, where it,
And
The
we
impact
did
of this.
condense these too, like, it might be a few lines here, but when you read the book, some of these things are like 4 pages long. I mean, we didn't have time to read the whole thing, so we condensed a lot of stuff too.
Not for the rape scenes.
That's
No.
not 4 pages long.
right, and for the entire book, it was, in detail, it was not explicit or graphic, but the impact and the redemption, this book is not just about gang rape and Muslim Sharia law at all, and this, I feel, is an,
It's sort of like, it's sort of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, in my opinion. Like, there are some beautiful parts to the book, that would be the sheep. But inside, there's enough wolf that can harm, it's adult content.
For young, impressionable minds.
Right, we're not taught, like, they can read this in college even, like, why does it have to be now? And if it really had to be now, like I said, if it was this important in order to get into college, then it would be a required book, not one that's on a book to choose. Because obviously, if they really needed to get into college, then a lot of them aren't gonna get in because they might not have picked that book.
May I ask a question, a process question, or, so it looks like it does ask on the form if you read it in its entirety, and Jody, it looks like you said you had, and Carol, you have not read it. I didn't know, it's a couple weeks later, so I didn't know if you had a chance.
No, that's fine.
Okay, and then anyone can, so you do not need to be, so the parents who you said have talked to you in confidence that are nervous to come forward, don't feel comfortable filling this form out.
Right.
So anyone can, they have to just be a
Community,
citizen, a
yeah.
taxpayer
Yep,
to.
within our boundaries, very similar, Jennifer, to like, when you speak at our board.
Got
You
it,
have to
okay,
have a tie to the school district's parents.
okay, okay, cool.
I still am confused whether or not, and maybe you understood, whether or not there is a parent permission slip for the high school use in the regular English class.
Yep, that is the process, I believe, and I'm gonna look at our 2 English teachers, and that is something that is being refined by.
But this year, let's say if it was offered on a book club list this year, the parents had to sign off. But once again, I'm assuming there was no synopsis or no description of.
Yeah, there is, we give that.
Is
Kids
it-
have it on their Canvas, in their Canvas accounts, we
So
supply.
the parents have to go to Canvas.
They can ask their student to show them the
Okay.
summary, we
So
email
they
it
would have
home.
to,
We can email it home to parents, we've done that. Here's the link, take a look. These
but
are the
it's not an
summaries.
automatic thing. The parents don't get these links.
Yeah, I
emailed to
email them. They get emailed to parents. In addition to being on their children's Canvas page,
Mhm.
they have access at any time through
And what
that.
kind of descriptions do you
We have
have?
summaries of the books.
And what would you say the Kite Runner summary?
This book, in English 1, I teach English 1, and we don't have this book in English 1, so I cannot speak to that.
Have you taught this book? No. So we don't know what the summary, that would be very interesting to see
They're
what the
typically
summary is.
like what's on the back of the book or the book jacket.
So it might not say much about the profanity, it might say a rape or something.
I can't speak to that because I haven't, I mean, I
Is there any way
have.
we could get a copy of that permission slip? I'm just
I
curious.
certainly can, not for this committee, but for
Right.
that purpose. I want to get back to the fact that
Right.
we are not changing that process. We
Right,
hear
right.
what the concerns are, we hear at the board meeting, that's for a different group of people. too.
I also,
I do want to wrap up concluding questions, because we're at the hour mark,
Right.
so.
I do have one. The charter school that you referenced that does a book selection process,
Mhm.
what charter school is that?
If you go online, I've given you the link to the article. I think it's called, where is it? LC, so it's Liberty Common. They have a high school and at least a middle school. This is their list of recommended books. And as I told the group an hour ago at the 57 bus group, there are hardly any books that you have here in the West Bend School District from this list. This is a recommended list. They ask their children to read like 30 minutes a night or whatever, and to read from this list. They are a core knowledge school, so they recommend certain authors, and then they recommend actual titles. Like, for example, they have some history titles by Stephen Ambrose, but then they go into sort of famous literature like Jane Austen, let's see, Pearl S. Buck, which was very popular in my time, in the olden times, Dostoevsky, Euripides, Scott Fitzgerald. I don't believe any of these are on our high school reading list. U.S. Grant's possibly the greatest book of memoirs ever published. Let's see, Homer's Iliad, I read in high school, Henry James, Elizabeth Keckley, which is a fantastic, I was shocked to see this. My background is, of course, history. Abraham Lincoln, I worked at his home in Springfield, Illinois, as a park ranger. Elizabeth Keckley was Mary Lincoln's seamstress in Washington, D.C. This, she wrote sort of like an autobiography about her life living with the Lincolns. I thought that was just a wonderful selection. Rudyard Kipling has many books, Machiavelli's The Prince, Moliere, Thomas More, Eugene O'Neill, not just the famous one.
So is
What's
FordhamInstitute.org, is that the link?
That's the link, that's the group that wrote, that the article is published in. Liberty Common High School, it's in Colorado, and it will tell you all about it. It's a shame that so many of these classics, and we were kind of made fun of at the last meeting where they said, well, virtually any book before 1960 won't, it won't have the profanity or whatever. Of course, because these are classics. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein would appeal to the boys, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Sophocles, Solzhenitsyn's One Day. I mean, it's Oscar Wilde, Jules Verne. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Corrie ten Boom, who's the woman who helped during the Holocaust. I mean, I don't see any of these books in the West Bend School District. What happened? Plato's Republic, where is it?
So
I'm sorry.
I can't speak to that.
I
That's
know, you
outside
can't.
the bounds of where we want to go. I want to,
But we're being told that this book is just wonderful. When there are so many other books that could talk about redemption and forgiveness, Dostoevsky's great at that.
okay. All right. Any other clarifying questions before we move on this evening?
I don't know if this is clarifying, but I am just really curious. Who gets to choose what I read or my child reads, in your opinion? Do you get to choose, or does the teacher get to choose? Who gets to choose?
I believe the teacher should choose as long as we give the trust to the teacher that they're going to not present vile stuff. And there's lots that they can choose from. So when I send my kid to, the younger grades even, I mean, the teachers usually even choose what the books, a lot of times, the kids are reading, right? And that's fine, as long as the books aren't vile and stuff like that.
But that is a choice that you're making. I'm curious.
Then I'm making a
Yeah.
choice that the teacher would make the choice, is what you're saying.
The teacher really doesn't make the choice. If you read the description, if you read through your policies, you'll see that there's this convoluted thing about maybe sometimes they'll have administrators, maybe sometimes they'll have teachers in that subject area that will decide what's on the curriculum. It's complicated.
Yes, and it's also community values. Like all of our things in our policies say, it has to meet the community values. Our community values aren't about rape and stuff, right?
But not everybody in the community values the same thing.
But hopefully they don't value rape.
And I'm
But
just saying
this
in
book
general.
doesn't promote rape. It doesn't value rape.
But it describes things
depicts
like, it
it,
describes
Because
things like
unfortunately,
this.
people find themselves in positions where that happens to them.
Right, and then, and the teachers are not psychiatrists, so when their student starts reading things about the detailed description about the attempted suicide, and all of a sudden it brings back things like, oh my gosh, my brother, my uncle, my cousin, my dad, whatever. Now, again, the teachers, first of all, they're floating from classroom to classroom. Are they prepared to be discussing some of these hard topics with the kids? They're not.
Well, that's
And
why it's a really good.
Another thing,
Student
I
voice.
served on the Human Growth and Development Committee. And I was oblivious to what's going on in the rest of the school district as far as like this kind of stuff. But when I served on it, we were very, very clear about what the boundaries were, about what was gonna be talked about at home with the families, regardless of whether parents thought, well, I want my kids to learn about, how to do it a different way. If you want your kids to know that, that's something you do at home. The boundaries were very set, very rigidly in that class. But what good were those? What if outside of that class, where people have their radar up, what are they gonna learn in that class about sexuality and stuff? That's where the parents have their radar up and, oh, it looks like it's gonna be pretty benign. They're gonna learn, how the sperm and the egg make a baby or whatever, and that's it. But then all of a sudden now you've got, and that's even having a doctor or a nurse or somebody presenting some of this material at the Human Growth and Development. But now all of a sudden, we're talking about all this different types of sexuality and stuff outside of Human Growth and Development, where if it was gonna be anywhere, it should be there, and they're the ones where it got very limited. I feel like, you know what, whatever they decide in Human Growth and Development, it should actually kind of go across to the other classes, because if it doesn't, what was the purpose of reining it in Human Growth and Development? When there's actually teachers and nurses that can help with this subject.
I would just like to say that going back to when you said that some scenes in this book could bring up harmful memories,
Mm-hmm.
I personally believe that if I went through something as traumatic as that,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that my parents would then take an even closer look
Mhm.
of what books I am reading, because they know, let me look at this book and let me look at some of what the triggers are in the book, so I don't I don't have my child bring up these painful memories.
Thanks be to
But-
God, you have parents
but-
like that. Thanks be to God.
Not every child, thankfully, not every kid goes through those traumatic memories or events,
Mhm.
and so it might not exactly trigger the same emotions it would to someone who has gone through that. So
But we're
that's why,
supposed to be inclusive of
but-
everyone, right?
yes, but that's why it's on the choice list, and that's why the parent has to sign off.
But I bet in the description, it doesn't talk about suicide and stuff.
But if the parent knows that their child went through something like that, I know my mom or my dad would look closer into the book before I read it.
Right, and I commend your parent, I really do, because that's great parents.
There are
I
a
can
lot
tell
of-
by your disposition and everything here that you have wonderful parents.
I
For
do.
some students,
Yes, right,
And that's
I
why I
know.
believe that they should be making the choices of what books I can and cannot read. in
Right.
the classroom.
unfortunately, what came up in the discussion in the last hour is that there are many parents who are not aware of what's going on, whether it's because they're working too hard, whatever, but we have many children also in the school district who have trauma in their background, physical or sexual abuse. Our teachers have actually been trained to some extent in trauma-informed care, and that's what we're concerned about, is that some of this book in particular could trigger some of those children. Now, the teachers have some training in trauma-informed care, but they're still not psychologists, they're not psychiatrists. And so we're just worried about behaviors. That's one way that kids act up when they are triggered. They have a trauma background. Their behaviors are then going to have to be dealt with in the schools. We just feel that this is just not appropriate. Everyone's at a different maturity level, and I'm glad you're so mature But we just feel for a taxpayer-funded public school district, this is just, you can do better. The school district can definitely do better.
And I never see people, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it should start happening, but I never see people going to movie theaters and standing in line and picketing that the movie theater doesn't allow people under 17 to go into rated R movies without an adult. I don't see anybody picketing a bar that says you need a license, a 21, you have to be 21 to get into a bar and stuff. Like, some things just are not appropriate for certain ages. You don't get to go and shoot in a war before you're 17 or 18 years old. If you're 17, you gotta get permission from your family. But some things just aren't appropriate. And that's why they rate movies R at the movie theater, because yes, the parents should be able to make that decision, but if the parents wanna make that decision, they don't get to just go there and sign off and say, I decided I want this child to watch this movie. They have to actually go and sit through the movie, and so the only parents that are gonna probably do that are gonna be the better parents that wanna make sure that they have the discussions with their child. But some people are just too busy to do that. And they trust, this was about trust too, because a lot of parents trust the school system. And then all of a sudden, their trust they were like betrayed. They felt betrayed because their trust was that they didn't have to worry about this kind of stuff, that their kids are gonna be offered these kinds of choices. So they felt betrayed once they realized what they were being offered.
But do you have a sense of how many you're talking about?
I'll even tell you with my own children, and I know you know my children, that even when they were in school and they had a great education, one of my daughters just finished her residency program, she's a doctor. And one of mine's at UW Milwaukee going to grad school and stuff. And my other one's done all kinds of wonderful things. But anyway, but I know times that there were things that were going on in school that we talked about it. I was a good parent to talk, and every book that they brought home, I sat down and I read those books with them. I read 1984 3 times because I have 3 daughters, okay? But not every parent has that time to do that, right? But when they had some issues with things going on in school, and I'd be like, should I step in? I talk to them. Should I step in right now? Should I talk to your teacher about it, or whatever? And they would be like, oh, Mom, please don't. I want to be, I should just take care of this myself, blah, blah, blah. And you have to respect, for me, my part was I respected the child. Now, there's been times in my life where I kind of respected my child, where afterwards they were like, Mom, I was hoping you would say no, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of dense. You gotta be more, you gotta tell me really what you're thinking, because otherwise I'm gonna assume that what you're telling me in front of one person is what you really meant. But yeah, so even in my own personal experience, I know this happens, okay? I know that parents a lot of times don't step in when they could, or maybe they shouldn't, because I'm like, well, in a couple of years they're gonna be in college. So if they want this independence now, I'm gonna give it to them. But, so yeah,
Can I restate my question? I was just curious, because I think it would be helpful for this committee to know, because I respect the fact that if people are, wanting to not take action themselves. Right. Can you give us a sense of how many families that have kids right now that have read, been somehow inadvertently selected this book, or somehow were exposed to this content? Like, do you have a sense of what that number looks like?
Well, let me just put it this way. This isn't just something that the two of us dreamed up to do, like she said.
Oh, sure, I know it's happening everywhere.
It's the number 11 book in the nation that people are complaining
Oh,
about.
yeah.
How many
So-
parents
so-
have gone
in our
to you?
community.
How many
In our
parents have
community.
gone to you?
That
About
would,
this book.
I don't even need to say how many parents have gone to me, okay? But I'm just saying that obviously this isn't something we made up. This is a national crisis, and this book is number 11 on that list of people throughout the country and schools that have actually pulled it from the curriculum
Jody,
because they
certainly,
realized.
certainly.
Yeah.
I am very
Right.
well aware of that, right? It's a
Right.
very,
How-
it's a very well-run, coordinated type of thing, and I get that.
Mhm.
I was just curious, I think it would be helpful for us
Yes.
to know,
It
just
would be,
like
yes.
if you had a sense of,
But
if a handful of
But-
parents have talked
But
to you.
how do
or-
we contact these parents? Every student, it's confidential. we can't get the records of the high school and find out who read the Kite Runner. I couldn't do that for the 57 bus. All we had was the anonymous comments left on a Facebook page. So
Got
we
it.
can't do that, it's
And not everybody
confidential.
knows who I am, not
And they
everybody knows
didn't know
who
we
Carol
were
is.
working on this, even
Right,
gosh.
but
Okay,
we
okay,
might
okay.
find it
That's
on a, like one of the groups that we're on, and stuff like that.
No, that was
okay?
helpful, because I misunderstood. I thought you
Yeah.
meant that you were here sort of representing.
We are
No.
representing some people, because we
Yeah.
do have some people on a certain group that we belong to that were upset about this stuff, but they didn't want to speak.
Sure.
They don't want anybody to know who they are,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So that's why I was like, how many parents of
And there's
current
probably a
students
lot more that are talking to
Yes,
those parents, that are
yes.
talking to those parents, that are talking to those parents.
that have actually
And that,
said,
to me, that's irrelevant, because that does not tell you how many people are upset. Because I don't know everybody that's talking to everybody else, but when we are places, people are thankful that we're doing
Yes,
this.
they're telling
They're thankful
me
that we're doing
those-
this, and that we can do this, because we don't have any student that's at risk of feeling like their teacher, if the teacher gives them the wrong look for the day just because they were having a bad day at home, the student might be like, oh my gosh, they hate me, right? This way they don't have to feel that way at all, if the parent or the child doesn't bring it up to the teacher, right? So we're the voice for these people, so they don't have to ever feel like someone's looking down on them, even if they weren't.
But
You know?
just in the past week, since the video came out from the first meeting where I worked on the 57 bus at the middle school level, I have had many people come up to me, send me comments on Facebook and email, and thank me for my work, that it's a shame that our school system has books like this that we have to fight over.
Sure. I just think it's, it's good for us to know the people that this is directly affecting.
Right.
So it's
Especially-
helpful to know.
But this
Yeah.
book in
Parents of
particular
current
is
students.
obviously not used a lot. I mean, you don't know. I was gonna say, how many students actually read it this past year?
Sure.
Or the year before? Do we have statistics on that?
Sure.
So this is not a book it's still part of the curriculum the kids have a choice, but it's not like a book that's read by all the eighth graders or all.
Right.
it's,
Lillian, it looks like you had one last question, so I'll let you wrap us up this evening.
Um,
You looked like you had one more, so I want to make sure I'm correct.
So going back to how you say that with books like these, that people in the community could lose trust with their
Mhm.
teachers.
Mhm.
I know personally, and even if I didn't have the most involved parents, and they weren't checking in on like what books I was reading, and if I went through something traumatic, like if that book would bring up a trigger, I trust my teachers enough to know that if I started reading a book and it brought up a harmful memory to me,
Mhm.
I could go to them and be like, I don't feel comfortable finishing this book,
Mhm.
and they would listen to me, and they would make sure I was able to read a different book, and even exit the classroom if they were having a discussion about it, even if it was a choice book or a required book. I trust my teachers to know that they would make me comfortable.
Right, and I agree with that, except that the damage has already been done, you've already been triggered by that time. Even if you didn't get to
If you
finish the book,
have-
you've already been like, oh my gosh, this is so traumatic for me, I cannot finish this book. You've already been traumatized.
Yes,
Also, could I just say, there are many students who do have mental health issues, and they will react differently. They're not gonna be as rational as you are and go to the teacher. They're gonna react differently. They're gonna have behavioral issues. They will maybe skip school. I mean, there are many ways that triggers can occur. So, I mean,
That's the
I'm glad that you feel so confident about
The
your
assumption
teachers.
is though that anytime you read about something that's negative, that it's going to be a harmful trigger, but sometimes when students have experienced something that is traumatic, reading about it and knowing that they are not the only ones who have experienced something like that is actually a relief. It's allowing them to feel like, oh, I'm normal, or it's okay for me to feel like this, or it's okay to know that I'm not the only person who's ever struggled. And I think so much of this is going back to like it's gonna harm them, but sometimes that's not the outcome.
But then what is the purpose of having a psychiatrist or a counselor? Because that is to help them realize that they're not alone, that this thing is not blah, 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 all that. That
Not all
the
students have one
classroom-
of those. We don't
Right.
have a psychiatrist.
And not all students have teachers that can help walk them through properly through these.
But that's what I'm saying, some people
Why
don't
would
need
we
someone to
risk
walk them
this?
through
Why do we
it.
have to risk that? Why do we have to even risk that?
And
Why would
I'm
this
saying it
work?
wouldn't be a risk, it would be, I'm reading this and thinking, oh, I can relate. It's not a risk.
But that's
it's a
you saying you
yes,
can relate, but that's not everybody that
No.
thinks that way. We're not robots.
And I think, as I mentioned also earlier at 5 o'clock meeting, that the answer to a lot of our problems is not simply to put a book on a shelf, especially a book that is as disturbing as this one. That's not the answer. You know, it's not always just there's the book, that'll help students. And you're right, some kids will be traumatized and some won't. We just don't feel this is an appropriate book. It's a dangerous book as far as I'm concerned.
And we shouldn't risk, to be inclusive, we shouldn't risk actually exposing someone who would be traumatized to the book. Right? We're trying to be inclusive of everyone, and we're not inclusive of Christians when we have books that are making fun of Christianity, for an example. Like, you want to be inclusive, there's not a possible way to be inclusive for everything, but for some reason, only certain people are allowed to be thought of and included, and we're saying, why risk it? When they can only read so many books in a school year, why aren't we giving them lists of books that we don't have to worry about vile stuff for their thing? There's a million books they could pick from, and they only have time to read a few books. So they wouldn't even know what they were missing, but they could still do this on the side. No one's saying, let's shut down the public library. No one's saying, we want to confiscate your Amazon account or anything. People can still do this on the side, and they should be reading on the side. But the problem is, most people don't read on the side much anymore because they're spending too much time on their phones. But maybe these really good books that they think are really good would give them an incentive to read extra books on the side if it's not on the curriculum. And they're like, oh, I heard this book is a really good one, I think I'm gonna read it on the side. And then make sure that I'm reading it during a time of year that I can go to my teacher because my parents maybe really aren't the person I wanna talk to about these things. Or make sure that my parents are around because I can talk to my parents about these things.
All right, I'm gonna wrap us up this evening, unless there's any burning thing that I've missed, but as I kind of read the room, I feel like everybody's got their questions answered, so I appreciate that. So our task for the committee next, so when I look at all of you and our two absent members this evening, is to, you need to, if you have not read the book, read the book between now and our next meeting. If you need a copy of the book, I have them here, so I will give you one after, if you would like that. Please review the policies that I handed out to you this evening, the document that Ms. Hager and Ms. Keenan handed us this evening about their statement, along with the packet of the request for information, instructional resource form, request for reconsideration. That includes, I believe it was Ms. Hager who said there are some additional
Yes.
reviews in there
Yes.
and so forth. I would also ask that you take your own time to read other places and so forth. There are numerous review sites out there that was discussed tonight and so forth.
And everybody, I do want to say, all of you had great questions, and even if it looked like I didn't think they were, I do think they were all great questions. So thanks for asking them.
So the
Okay.
task when we come back is there won't be the back and forth with
Right.
the two of you. It will be this group having a conversation as if you look at the AR, it's to identify the strengths of the resources and any areas of concerns. And so that's what we'll go through. That'll be the process I'm gonna try to walk you through. And then at that point in time, make some sort of a recommendation that I can write up in that process on behalf of the committee to move that forward. And again, just as a reminder, it is not, we aren't looking for unanimous. It could be 3 and 2 or whatever. It is what the committee decides, and I will try to capture that in my writing at that point in time. So next meeting is July, I almost said June, I apologize, July 19th at 6:30 PM. I'm 99% sure we'll be in this room, but you will receive an agenda email from me that evening. If you have questions about the process in the meantime, please reach out to me, otherwise I will call our committee meeting